Well, hello and welcome to this edition of DMZ America, the podcast. This is episode 117. It is Thursday, September 21st, 2023. I, of course, am editorial cartoonist Scott Stantis, coming to you from the right.
And I, naturally, am editorial cartoonist Ted Rall, coming to you from the left.
Organically, any way you, or yeah.
Pesticide
Pesticide
not
free.
au naturel, but the podcast is young. That could change.
Let's see what we can, get those numbers up, man. Sell it with the sexy. That's us right here. So Attorney General Merrick Garland testifies in front of Congress. Gets, the Republicans, of course, try to get him to admit that he is slanted and has weaponized the Justice Department for the nefarious purposes of the Democrat Party. Don't you love that they drop the IC? That's why, Republicans think they're being so fucking clever because they think you're the Democrat. Anytime you listen to like Fox or the Democrat Party, it's the same thing like Let's Go Brandon. They think that's the very height of urbanity, Oh, no, that's so funny. Get it?
Yeah, they think it's weird. I don't understand what the Let's Go Brandon thing. I don't even understand. It's kind of like it's totally insidery. Look, it's obviously not meant to perturb or own the libs because most libs don't even know what they're talking about. And if they did know what it was talking about, they're like, oh, you're just trying to say fuck you, Biden, because of that thing that happened that one time. And it's like, it doesn't get to no Democrats' blood gets boiling as a result of that. The Democrat Party, it's just infantile, right? It goes back quite a ways. It started in the 1970s or 80s when right-wing Republicans started calling it, they called it a slur, like that, you drop the ick. But I'm like, where's the slur? All you're doing is just not saying the name of the party correctly. It would just be like if I said the Republic Party, it would just be wrong, but it wouldn't really be insulting. It would just make me sound kind of dumb.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it sounds like. And Mark Levine has come out with the fire-breathing dipshit talk radio guy has come out with a book. The Democrat Party hates America. It's very subtle.
Very subtle. Whereas, look, both sides do this shit. Like I see it in my Go Comics feed in the comment section where people call them the Rethuglicans or like the Orange Trader and I'm like over and over and over and over. And they have, or Trump, like small T, capital R, rump, like Trump. And I'm like, really? This is so dumb. It's just so fucking dumb.
It's dumb. Yeah, no, there's no question about it. So, so the opening salvo, we now know.
Shrub was funny. Molly Ivins used to call the second Bush Shrub. That's funny.
Yeah.
It's not very funny, but it's funny.
Funny.
It's a little funny. It qualifies. It gets over the finish line of funny, but it's like a 14-minute mile.
So we the opening salvo has been fired for the Biden impeachment. Merrick Garland was the first witness. I don't know what's coming up next. Who cares? Because we all know where this is going, right? Ted, are you and I on the same page? The Republican, what can I call them? The Republicans are.
Yeah, people have called them that. That would actually not be so bad.
No, they're Republicans, not Republicans. But the Republicans are going to push hard. The narrative is obvious, and but I gotta tell you, I'm really dying to see a real, honest to God investigation of this story to see, did Joe Biden get any money? So many question marks in my mind, and I don't hate Joe Biden. This isn't a hate Joe Biden fest. You hate Joe. You dislike Joe Biden a lot more than I do, Ted. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, my blood doesn't boil. I just think that he never should have been elected president. I thought he was, of that debate stage with whatever 12 or 19 or whatever fucking number of Democrats it was in 2020, he was the worst one. So like, why pick him? We'd be rocking it with Amy Klobuchar by comparison. It's just like they literally, I just think it's sort of like really you had this abundance of choices and you went with the absolute worst dog shit choice. Um, that's, I mean, it's just why he was too
Well,
old. He was
get used to
too
it.
dumb. He's too slow. He's got no imagination at all. It's just like there's no ideas there. I mean, he's and he's kind of ethically challenged.
Well, and that's what I wanted to get to, is that this isn't going to be like a bash Biden, party. This is, I mean, but there, stay with me on this. There's a ton of smoke. And then all of a sudden, when the story starts to change, you start to think there's something up there. And the part of the story that changed was Joe Biden, President Biden, had no knowledge of what Hunter was up to, none whatsoever. And then it turns out he showed up on phone calls, or sometimes even
only
in
24
person,
of them so far. I mean,
that we know
who
of, right?
hasn't had 24 phone calls about the same exact business matter and been part of it and forgotten all about it? Who among us can truly say?
I can see him forgetting it. that holds
20,
together.
It's a lot of, even for Joe Biden, that's a lot of forgetting.
So also the shell corporations, almost, how many shell corporations are we aware of now? It's
dozens.
Like a dozen. Yeah, dozens of them. Why?
And they were interlaced. They were shell companies within shell companies. I mean, I guess the defense might be, when in Delaware, that's what they do there.
Yeah, but you do it for a reason. I mean, I've thought about incorporating or having an LLC or something. I never did it because it didn't make a lot of financial sense to me. So I didn't do it. I mean, it's not expensive. No. So no, I don't think that explanation holds up, saying that, I'm in Delaware, I'm breathing, I should incorporate.
I was joking, just to be clear.
I know. But there's something worth looking at here. I mean, we're not going to get any serious information from the impeachment hearings, are we?
No, I don't believe we are. From the hearings? Well, from the hearings, we sure fucking will.
You think?
From the inquiry, I don't know, right? We're in the inquiry stage.
Well, the inquiry, now. I guess that's.
And by the way, I do think, I don't know, I'd be curious what you think. The conventional wisdom, even a week ago, was that there'd be an inquiry but no hearings, and if there were hearings, there would be no impeachment, and if there was an impeachment, there'd be no conviction. I don't believe any of that. And I will tell you, I'm very sure there will be hearings. I could be wrong about this.
No, you're right.
I think that there's a natural momentum. I think the Republicans certainly know enough to justify, in fact, really to require hearings. So right now they're sort of dipping their toes in to see if the water's tepid enough to jump in. I think it is. And so, what's funny is, Democrats are going to portray this as a fishing expedition. And guess what? It is constitutionally, impeachment hearings are fishing expeditions. That's what they are. So Watergate was, until they held those hearings, and they droned on for month after month after month, until Alexander Butterfield was like, oh yeah, this is all on tape, by the way. And everyone's like, wait, what?
Have you ever watched the
recently?
Oh, isn't it great? Because and he just says it, like, matter of fact, yeah, there were recording devices in the Oval Office and on the phone, and the senators, or is that the congressional hearing? They're going, okay, so Mr. Butterfield, what about? Wait, what? They literally do a.
Could you say that again, please?
Yeah.
So that's literally what it's like, and I think there's, so I think that they're going to get in there. Look, the problem is that not only is there no plausible counterfactual for where the $5.2 million came from in 2017, none has even been suggested by way of speculation by the Democrats who are defending Biden, right? Nobody's saying, oh, well, he sold a book and the book did really well, or he gave a lot of speeches.
Oh no, I've heard a number of them say that. And the fact of the matter is, those facts are, it's not true. He didn't get, like, the ex-president, complimentary publishing advance of, $15 million, $20 million.
Right. That didn't happen. He did a book, but it wasn't a big deal. He did a few speeches. Also, again, not like Bill Clinton money, where you're not really being paid for the speech, you're being paid for other things. So so yeah, there's no counterfactual there. The shell companies, there's no counterfactual. Like, well, he was involved in real estate. Real estate people often have shell companies. When I was a taxi driver in New York in the 80s, the most people who owned, like, say, 25 taxis had an individual shell company for each taxi. So it was like,
Okay.
taxi 5J88 LLC, blah, blah, blah. That way, if that taxi was involved in an incident, the legal
Right.
indemnification would presumably end there. So but again, he has no explanation. Like, well, I was doing a lot of real estate. I owned a fleet of taxis in Wilmington. No, he's just like crickets. So the fact that there's no counter narrative, and we have that Ukrainian oligarch, the Burisma guy, who's pissed off at having been shaken down for $10 million, 5 to Hunter, 5 to Joe. It smells bad.
Yeah.
And it's like, it reeks to high heaven. And I think it's not going to be hard in an age of digital currency and wire transfers to find where the money came from, what it was for, and where it went.
Well, and let's bear in mind that the mastermind of all this was a coked out prostitute digesting, nut bag. So I imagine the record keeping was not as, cloak and dagger as vice president at the time Biden would have hoped. I think there is something here. I really do think that there's some fire here. And you and I both get screamed at every fucking day because we have the temerity to suggest that old Joe may not be as clean as they want him to be. The greatest president, the greatest president in the last 60 years.
Well, let's put it this way, Scott. Let's go with what we do know, because Biden's defenders say, well, you guys are still fishing and you don't have evidence.
No, that's not true. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But let's just say what we know for sure. We know for sure that Hunter Biden, having no qualifications whatsoever, had $1 million a year no-show job, in scare quotes, for a Ukrainian energy company run by a corrupt oligarch. We know that. We also know that while he was working there, he got Joe in on the phone, not only with the Ukrainians, but also with the Chinese and the Kazakhs and the Romanians to say hi. And so obviously Joe knew, at bare minimum, that Hunter was selling the Biden family name. He knew that we know that. That's a fact. So then we know that Joe Biden became president and then went to war for Ukraine, one of the countries involved here, not a different country, not one of, but like, I would say the same thing if he had gone to war for Kazakhstan or Romania, but
or China.
Or China seems unlikely. But like, the point is that, like, we know those things. Now, we know many other things too, but even if you just know these things, that smells really fucking bad, even if you just know those things. And it's like, is that not corruption? I mean, that is corruption by itself. I mean, really? I mean, do I have to find out that Joe personally cashed a check for $5 million to be able to call that corruption? Do I have to know that, Joe got a Ukrainian prosecutor fired who was investigating Burisma? Well, we know that too. We know that. Yeah. And that he did it, and that he did it for corrupt reasons to line his own pockets. Do we need to know that second part? Not really, because if I engage in corrupt practices and don't collect any money, but my son does, that's corruption. If I do it for my kid, right? If you do it for your kid, right? Like, if I like do a favor for in some corrupt way for someone who pays me off, and all the payment comes in cat food for Clovis, I'm still corrupt, right? I mean, Clovis enjoys the cat food. That's cat food I don't have to buy for Clovis. That's corruption.
Right. But I don't even think you have to make that stretch in this case. I suspect there's a smoking gun, and the smoking gun is that email on the laptop in which he says,
complaining to, who is it, his sister or his or some other Biden family member, where he says like, hey, well, it's not easy running this family. You don't have to give your dad half your income.
Yeah. I mean, so what do you mean by that? You get him, make him put his hand on the Bible and you ask him, what did you mean by that?
Yeah. What was that referring to specifically?
Yeah. So I think this is one of those few times, like with the Clinton impeachment, I thought was silly, or the investigation was dumb, pretty much a waste of time. But when he lied under oath, that's an impeachable offense. Now, they didn't convict him, obviously, but that kind of got there. The first Trump impeachment was preposterous.
It should be revoked. If you can do that. I don't even know if you can de-impeach someone.
I don't know if you can de-impeach, but I imagine you could apologize, or just, I don't know what.
Yeah, you could do a resolution.
Yeah, just say, hey, we kind of screwed up there. Sorry.
My bad.
So, okay, that's where we stand now. We know but the Republicans are not going to be able to control themselves and make this and sell the American people, much like the Watergate hearings in the 1970s, which are, as Ted said, they did drone on. But this is how big a dork I was. I rushed home every day to watch as much of it as I could.
Me too. I didn't watch. I was an avid baseball fan. I skipped the playoffs to watch this.
Nobody had pulled the curtain back on a presidency as far as that curtain got pulled back during those hearings. And it was fascinating. How does a day-to-day, you had an idea of how a presidency worked, but you never really knew.
No.
Here's a suggestion to our listeners, and I'm not sure if you've done it yet at all, Ted, but JFK recorded phone conversations.
Mm-hmm, that's true.
And it's fascinating. When he had the ones that they've posted recently, he's talking to Eisenhower and he's talking to Harry Truman as a courtesy during the Cuban Missile Crisis, just to keep them informed. But the ones that are really interesting are the ones where he's talking to political aides. First of all, to hear JFK curse is shocking, because every piece of film you've seen of him prior to this was like, we decided to go to the moon for this and that other reasons, not because it is easy, but because it is hard. You see the speeches, you see the press conferences, but in private conversation, he goes, I don't give a fuck about this. Let's just get this fucking done. And you're just going, whoa.
Well, but on the other hand, all presidents curse. It's a requirement.
Well, I think in private conversation, especially in that era, it was just expected. That's how men spoke to each other.
Yes, that's correct.
But now, obviously,
as they should.
That's why I think Trump has dropped a few, not F-bombs, but other curse words, and no one bats an eye because, come on, it's this culture, this podcast, for Christ's sake, let alone the general coarsening of the culture. So, okay, so stay tuned. We're going to, obviously, this is an issue that's, I think, let's go on the record right now. I believe that Joe Biden gets impeached. Obviously, if it's a Democrat-controlled Senate, then he doesn't get convicted. But I think he gets impeached.
That's an interesting question. I agree. I think he gets impeached, probably not convicted in the Senate, but I won't rule it out because he is so, I think that when it could be one of those situations where I guess if he were impeached in the House and it's headed toward the Senate, and if it's really gross and ugly, he'll be forced to not run again. He'll have to step aside. He'll have to pull an LBJ in 1968. But if he doesn't do that, if he holds on to it, then I think we're talking about this. You could maybe find those 9 or 10 Democrats to cross over and say, I can't fucking go with this.
Well, maybe very similar to what happened to Nixon, as the Republican senators led by Barry Goldwater came to the White House and said, we can't vote. You're going to lose. If you have the trial in the Senate, you will lose.
Yeah. I think that's right. I mean,
but I think our politics are not nearly that honorable anymore. I just would be shocked to see anyone jump their respective ships. I just don't see that happening, but okay. But both of you and I believe that he'll be impeached. I think he should be. If this is going in the direction I think it's going,
yeah,
then absolutely. I mean, then this is the worst corruption of a president since Teapot Dome. I mean,
Well, I just like to remind everybody that like we always get mocked for being early. We were talking about in November, December of 2019, 2020, we were like, Trump and his followers, they're refusing to accept defeat. They're going to try some shit. They're going to try a coup. They're going to try to overthrow the government. Something like that. We don't know what exactly, but they're going to try something out of control and violent. And it was, you guys are crazy, but they did. We were like, and so, yeah, I think it's, we've been mistaken, although not very often, but certainly we have a pretty good, I'm trying to think, have we been mistaken? I've been personally mistaken. I don't know if we've been mistaken here on the podcast since we started doing about anything of note. If anybody's listening and they can think of something, you could just tweet it at us.
Please.
At Ted Rall or at Scott Stantis. It's possible.
Yeah. But I mean, that's always been Ted's thing, is that I'm trying to take some credit for it, is that he's always been kind of ahead of the curve by a lot. And that's always the worst thing to be. They always say that you should be the second person through the door when
yes.
But
yeah, it's really not awesome to be that. I mean, I remember early on in the fall of 2001 saying, ranting about how we were going to lose in Afghanistan, and I was ridiculed.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I'm thinking, in this instance, I mean, we're seeing our cartoon friends or our compadres do cartoons that are already exonerating Biden. Clay Bennett shows a saw labeled impeachment, and it's cutting a hole in the floor, but it's to the, off to the side, and Joe Biden is standing there heroically. You're going, what are you talking about?
Absurd. Or like Zelensky, like we expressed some doubts about him as a bulwark against democracy. And like now he's canceled not only the parliamentary, but the presidential election.
Wait, when did he do that?
The presidential election, he quietly canceled last week. It's required under the Ukrainian constitution. And some of his supporters, Republican supporters in the House and Senate, are a little bit dismayed because it's hard to call you can't really say that Ukraine is a democracy if you don't have elections, but it would be hard to have elections because he threw all the opposition political leaders into prison where they are being tortured. All their newspapers and TV stations have been closed, so under martial law. So I don't blame him. You could sort of tell when Biden gave his speech urging congressional support for Ukraine, and he went to the UN and did the same. He pivoted. He used to talk about how it was important to defend Ukraine as a democracy. Now he talks about how it's important to defend Ukraine's territorial integrity, which of course is something that any nation state has, or should have. It's like, so you can tell he's kind of like, the Democrats have decided to, Ukraine's defenders have decided to no longer call Ukraine a democracy because it just doesn't hold water.
Wow. Okay. Why was that nowhere to be found on the news? I haven't seen, I've been waiting for that announcement. I haven't seen it said. That's why I'm sounding shocked.
It's like you can find it very subtly buried deep inside like BBC or AFP.
Really?
It's like, it's like blink and you'll miss it. Yeah. You can look it up. Just Google it. Just Google up Ukraine elections. You'll see.
Okay, I'll do it. And you should do it too, our listeners. So, okay, we're going to wrap this up, and then we are going to be back to talk about media and a media guy who's in the news, because that's what we do here at the DMZ America podcast.
Well, we do other things too. Recipes, cat sitting tips,
interpretive dance. It's a full plate here. Anyway, we'll be back right after this break. I'm Scott Stantis, coming to you from the right.
Ted Rall coming to you from the left.